you just do it, it'll turn out okay. And I like looking back. Oh, let's welcome me back first of all, because it's been a while since I've done one of these things. It's been like a month or two break. But also welcome back, Snick.
Hello.
Hello.
Mm.
Today's topic is all for all his doing.
Yeah, the latest movie binge I did was for the 007 movies, and I've since the next binge I'm doing currently, now that the 007 binge is over, is the Disney live action remakes, but that's another story that'll be finished in due time.
Good luck with that one. Maybe better
It's
than some.
already horrible. Like I've watched 5 of the remakes so far. Only one of them was a passable score. That would be the Jungle Book remake. All the others were mediocre to Lion King 2019. And it was double whammy because I use a roulette wheel of names to decide what order I watch the movies. I landed on Lion King and Mufasa back to back.
One of these days we should do, or I want to do a live not a live Disney, not remake, but they're actual live kid friendly movies like Mary Poppins and all that stuff like that.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's talk about Bond.
Yeah, so last year there was a movie called The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare or something like that. And essentially the whole thing was like a stealth reveal that movie's loosely based on a true story of like British secret agents in World War II. And Henry Cavill's character in that movie was actually examined by one author by the name of Ian Fleming, and Henry Cavill's character from that movie was the loose inspiration, was based on the guy that loosely inspired the James Bond character.
Real fast, speaking of James Bond, I remember pre-pandemic, you used to have some kind of James Bond day on your channel. We streamed or something, we did something on it.
Well, it was because my gram was a fan of the movies, even though I hardly ever actually saw her watching them. And then I kind of stopped doing that because it was meant to be like get-togethers, and I noticed we got to a point where nobody really wanted to do them, so I stopped after Agent Under Fire. Like, I got to a point where I was the only one who wanted to do them, so I just stopped.
Yeah. So what's the you know anything about the history of James Bond movies?
Well, like, I don't know, like, how production got started. Like, I know bits and pieces of, like, what was going on behind the scenes. All I know is that United Artists was the original distributor. Like, this was back when United Artists was, like, a major movie studio, and their downfall is, like, sort of another story. And the production company that United Artists was backing, like the people who were doing the actual work, they were called Eon Productions. And the head of Eon Productions, I believe, was a guy called Albert R. Broccoli, or he was often nicknamed Cubby. And I don't know what went into the creation of this first official movie. I know there was like a TV serial based on that adapted Casino Royale in the 50s, but I do not know much about that one. And yeah, I mean, obviously they cast Sean Connery, and yeah, and of course they had a bunch of books that Ian Fleming had written at the time. All I know is that James Bond was created as a British character, but Sean Connery was Scottish. That said, Ian Fleming was alive to see the first few of Sean Connery's movies, and he was impressed enough with his performance that in some of the last Bond books he wrote, he actually did work it into his backstory that he had Scottish heritage.
Instead of just pure English.
Yeah. But anyways, I don't know if you have a slideshow or anything.
No, I hope that you could screen share your letterbox thing.
Screen share my list.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So maybe I could zoom this in. Because I did arrange the movies in order when they were released. Okay, well, I'm going to share screen. I'm going to select a window. Okay, so now I can see what's being shared. This is what I called the list, the Bond binge.
Should have killed.
All right, and now that's as far as I can zoom it in. So maybe if there I go. I erased it. Oh, never mind. If I'm gonna, yeah. All right. So this is what we get. So that's our first movie, Dr. No.
So are all these movies in chronological order of thing?
They're in the order when they released.
Okay.
So for this binge,
sorry.
So for this binge, I watched all the 25 official movies as well as the 2 unofficial movies.
I was just wondering if there's a James Bond timeline, or is it all a multiverse, or what?
So essentially, the first 20 movies, like from Sean Connery, the start of Sean Connery, all the way to the end of Pierce Brosnan, are supposed to be the same continuity, despite the changes in actors and everything. That said, while they did care about continuity, they weren't like super egregious about it. So it's sort of loose, I guess you could say. But then when Daniel Craig took over, it very obviously was a reboot because they reestablished a lot of things and like changed a lot of stuff, and like the Daniel Craig movies would not fit in the original continuity. And then the unofficial movies are their own thing.
All
right, so the first movie is Dr. No. It's just a set of it's just very humble beginnings for the series. It was 1962. Like, it's a very basic movie looking back. Like, you know how each Bond movie is like famous for having like an opening theme and everything? Well, this one just has the James Bond theme, like the famous one, like that's like like that's just what the opening credits play on. That's it. And like it needs time to establish itself, but like it's still an effective movie, but like I guess you could say there's not really anything super memorable about it. Like, probably the most notable set piece I can remember from it is a scene where they try to assassinate Bond by using a tarantula, like some kind of poisonous tarantula. And the thing that's notable about filming that scene is that Sean Connery was deathly afraid of spiders. So, for scenes where you could not see Connery's face, they had a stunt double filming it as like the spider was crawling on the body. And then for scenes where they had to show Sean Connery's face, there was a very obvious pane of glass separating him and the spider.
Uh,
And yeah, then the only other thing I could really bring up about this movie was the villain, the titular Dr. No. Um, I mean, he's a good villain to start out with. Like, he's got authority and menace to his performance. That said, he's only in the movie for like the last 20 minutes.
so was Connery already an established actor? This where he made his.
I'd say this movie is where he became like super famous, but he did act in stuff before. I think the most notable thing he was in before this was a Disney movie called Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Coincidentally, he was the longest surviving actor of that movie. But yeah, like, this movie is just pretty basic. Like, the only other thing I could really mention about it was that the actor who played Dr. No ended up lasting the longest of all the actors who played Bond villains during Connery's tenure. And apparently he hated how most people knew him for playing Dr. No. He wanted more people to remember him for his stage career.
Hey, listen, I might have not heard if you said it, but what was the plot of the movie? What was the villain trying to do?
I honestly can't remember. Like, that's how basic this movie is. Like, basically, they had a bit of a story arc going on throughout the Connery movies where, like, Spectre is, like, funding world terrorism, more or less. And also kind of funding the Cold War, probably. Like, all I can tell you is that for most of the Connery era and even into like the Roger Moore era, lots of the plot is going to be a blank in my mind. Because all right, well, that's Dr. No. So next up is From Russia with Love. And the thing with From Russia with Love is it's basically Dr. No, except a little bit better. Like, it's a lot more what you would expect of, like, the classic 007 formula. Like, the plot is more engaging, mostly in how there's a lot of continuity with the Spectre storyline. Like, you see a lot more of Spectre's inner workings. The leader of Spectre, Blofeld, makes his first appearance, but like you never see his face, and like you don't even know his name. He's only ever called Number One. And like the basic plot of the movie is that they want revenge against Bond for him killing Dr. No in the last movie. And I will say this movie's villain, Rosa Klebb, was a bit stronger because like they kind of show like how like kind of like go into the inner workings of like how she works for Spectre and everything. Same with her henchman, Red Grant. There's more consistent action scenes in the movie. Like one of the more subdued but climactic action set pieces has Rosa Klebb try to kill Bond with a poison shoe. It has like a knife on the bottom of the shoe and like one touch into the blood and then so it's done. The only other thing I can really say about From Russia with Love is that it was adapted into a game that notably got Sean Connery to provide the voice like 40 years later. And yeah. It also actionized the plot a little bit more. Like, I know the game added like an extra set piece at the end that revealed Red Grant survived past his initial fight scene just so they could have him for a final boss. But yeah. Yeah, I don't have much else to say about From Russia with Love, but yeah. Now, Next, we've got Goldfinger.
I think it's one everyone knows about. Would like to know
Yeah,
about.
Goldfinger is probably, in my opinion, and I have to share the sentiment, it's easily the best of Connery's Bond movies. Like, it's the only it's the only Connery movie of the official continuity anyway that doesn't deal with Spectre at all. And for better or worse, like it actually really works out because it's a very standalone, self-contained movie. Like, it helps that Goldfinger himself and Oddjob are very iconic villains. Like, they have a great presence. Like, Oddjob is like practically invincible. It's not just the stupid GoldenEye video game memes where he's too short to hit. Like, no, in the movie, like, he puts up a huge fight against Bond where Bond kind of has to outwit him. And then Goldfinger himself, like obviously he gets like the famous laser scene where he's trying to interrogate Bond and Bond's about to be sliced in half by the laser. You get the famous, "Do you expect me to talk?" "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." Then I've also forgotten to mention that the typical formula with the Bond movies is that like you get like all the MI6 crew where Bond like learns his mission, like he has kind of sort of flirting with Miss Moneypenny. M gives him the mission. He gets his equipment from Q. And I'm going to talk more about Q later, but uh yeah, so like the MI6 cast is like very much recurring at this point. Um, then there's also the Bond girls who I haven't really brought up, but this one does a twist on the usual Bond girl formula with Pussy Galore, since she's technically a henchman of Goldfinger, but then she kind of like sort of has like switches allegiances. Then, of course, something you can see on the poster is the famous scene where Bond interacts with one other lady, and then he comes back, finds out she's completely covered in gold paint, which apparently skin suffocated her, which was something they believed in the 60s. I don't know if they really believe in it now. But yeah, like just from like all the iconic performances, that's why I say Goldfinger kind of falls as like the best of the Connery flicks, and
Yeah,
like yeah.
plus it had that parody in Austin Powers.
Yeah, I have not seen the Austin Powers movies in their entirety, but all right. So next movie is Thunderball. Now, Thunderball often there's a lot to talk about with Thunderball, I would say. So, on two fronts. One, like you'll notice numbers underneath each of these movies. It's
Yeah.
where I rank them on my list. And like at the end of this, I'll show like the full list so that you get like an idea.
Okay.
But Thunderball, if Gold for people who don't think Goldfinger is their favorite, Thunderball is another pick for favorite Connery movie, including from a friend of mine, DL Jado. I unfortunately cannot share the sentiment. Like, I did not feel strongly about Thunderball. Like, Connery puts in a good performance. Emilio Largo, who's the movie's villain, he is effective. And the movie's plot is pretty heavily rooted in like Cold War politics at the time. Like, basically, this is one of various Bond movies where if Bond fails the mission, it's going to escalate to nuclear war. And that's all fine and good. The problem is that this movie is way too much of a slow burn. Like, the first hour of the movie, not a whole lot happens. Like, it's mostly just build up. And even when stuff gets going, the movie can still be pretty subdued compared to like most of the other Bond flicks of the time. And like, yeah, there's a lot more realism to it, but it just didn't really gel with me. And now we talk about the elephant in the room related to Thunderball. That would be the legal crap it caused for the entire series going forward. So
Okay.
it's my understanding that the original Thunderball book was actually a co-writer project. Ian Fleming helped write it, but the guy who ended up claiming majority stake on Thunderball's copyright was a guy called Kevin McClory. And because of this, Kevin McClory had to be heavily involved when they were making the Thunderball movie. Like if you look at the list, if you look at like the production list of all the Bond movies, you'll notice very jarringly that Kevin McClory is the producer on this one, while like Eon Productions was sort of like on the side. And yeah, like then a few years after Thunderball came out, Kevin McClory ended up claiming, because of his ownership of the Thunderball story, that he technically owned the rights to the Spectre organization, who've been the central villains up to this point, which also included their leader, Blofeld. And the result of a legal dispute between him and Eon Productions resulted in Eon Productions being completely unable to use Spectre and Blofeld, starting with the Roger Moore movies. Like, they managed to get away with one exception, which I'll get to, but yeah. Kevin McClory was very, very, very butthurt about Eon Productions' success with the franchise. So he basically held on to the Spectre and Blofeld rights and the Thunderball rights by extension, basically out of petty spite.
So I gotta say this: I never knew there was a book series. James Bond was also a book series.
Well, it started as a book. So yeah, I will get to the results of Kevin McClory's exploits a little bit later on, but yeah, that's
So this was
Thunderball.
this was the end of Connery.
No.
Oh,
So, before we get to the next Connery movie, we have this piece of shit. So, some of you might be confused because when you hear Casino Royale, you think the Daniel Craig movie, right? Well, that was not the first attempt to bring Casino Royale to the big screen. So, Casino Royale was the first of the books. That's like the beginning of the book timeline. But in a similar fashion to Thunderball, the movie rights to Casino Royale, because I think it has to do with like an initial start to get the movies going, but then it failed and then they had to start elsewhere. Well, the movie rights to Casino Royale were held by Sony, Columbia Pictures at the time. I don't think Sony owned them at the time, but Columbia. And they decided, with the Sean Connery movies doing so well, they were going to make their own Casino Royale movie. And it's a very, very long story of how Casino Royale 67 got made. And yeah, like lots of stuff happened, ranging from briefly trying to get Sean Connery to play the role, but then they decided not to when he asked for a really huge salary. And then basically what happened was Peter Sellers, who's probably best known for playing Inspector Clouseau in the old Pink Panther movies, he was cast as Bond. But then, after they cast him as Bond, they more or less decided, you know what? It sounds like a really bad idea to compete with the official Bond movies, so let's not even try. Instead of making this a serious spy movie, let's make it a comedy spoof. I am not joking. And even though Peter Sellers' bread and butter was comedy, he was actually really upset because he did genuinely want to play a version of Bond. My understanding is that Peter Sellers was on the set for like half of filming, and then he just walked away, never to return.
So they work around that?
They tried. So they ended up getting another actor, David Niven, to fill in for Peter Sellers' remaining scenes. And the result is, because they couldn't afford to, either because they couldn't afford to go back and refilm Sellers' scenes, that or they were just lazy, they ended up...
And this was way before the days they could just CGI the guy's face on a stuntman or something.
Yeah. And for whatever reason, they decided they were going to make a convoluted story of how there were actually multiple James Bonds. And it's funny because the initial Bond we're seeing in the movie is David Niven, and then Peter Sellers doesn't come in until much later. And let's just say most of the movie is random nonsense. Like, it makes no sense. Like, all right, you know what? Stop me when you think this sounds too stupid for a Bond movie. So basically, the idea is that they want Bond to come out of retirement. There's one entire set piece where, like, he's like in this Scottish mansion, and then he has to do like this manliness test where that involves all these dudes in kilts, I think, freaking trying to best him in combat. One of them tries to throw a bowling ball, but then just falls backwards.
Stop for a second. You just said, I'm confused for a second. How can he come out of retirement if this is the first movie? It is the first in the chronology in the timeline
of this. I don't know. So and then it keeps going. Like, it's just random nonsense. Like, sometimes it's on Niven's Bond, sometimes it's on Sellers' Bond. Sometimes they do bullshit. Then randomly Woody Allen comes in and he's put in front of a firing squad, and he has this line about like, oh, you know, I don't want bullets to go through me. You know, that's not going to be good. And it just goes back and forth. Oh, for a quick 5 minutes, you get Orson Welles as Le Chiffre, the villain of Casino Royale. And like for 5 minutes, we get an actual Casino Royale adaptation. What a shocker. And then it abruptly ends as a UFO flies over London. And then it turns out Woody Allen was actually the villain the whole time because he was tired of being turned down by women because he's too short. Lost yet?
Yes.
And did you catch the part about the UFO flying over London?
Yeah, I heard all about that.
Yeah, when the UFO showed up, when I was watching Casino Royale 67 in a watch party with with DL Jado, Miles, and Sean. The part where the UFO showed up was like the part where Miles and Sean at least collectively went, fuck this, I'm done. This movie is complete, utter freaking nonsense.
So was this before Woody Allen became that infamous pedophile person?
I know of Woody Allen's crimes. I do not know if he was committing them during the filming of this movie, but yeah, he was pretty young during this.
So then probably before that, way before that then.
Yeah. So, Casino Royale 67, it's the worst of the Bond movies I've watched. Like, I mean, lots of people tell me, well, it's not an official movie, so it doesn't count. Well, it was released in theaters, and even though Columbia was the original distributor, MGM did get the rights to it eventually, and they put it out on DVD, which is what I own.
Official movie?
Unofficial movie.
Oh.
Because it was not made by the usual production company, Eon. So yeah, but of the theatrically released Bond movies, this was the worst. Just utter garbage. But now, the very same year, we also got another Connery movie. It was You Only Live Twice. Now, You Only Live Twice. When I watched it right after Thunderball, and people generally considered it a step down from Thunderball, from how it's a bit more ridiculous and also is a bit more of a brainless action set piece movie. But at the same time, I felt like the pacing was a lot stronger. I did really like the more explosive action scenes, especially during the climax. They do have relevant Cold War themes, like this one particularly ties itself to the space race. And finally, the villain Blofeld, who his face and name were completely unseen in both From Rush with Love and Thunderball. This one finally reveals his face. He's played by Donald Pleasance, best known for playing Dr. Loomis in the Halloween movies. And yeah, he's like the stereotypical like portrayal of Blofeld. Like he has a scar on his face, he has like a pet cat. Like he's the basis of what Dr. Evil looks like in Austin Powers. And yeah, this movie's decent. And that's all I really have to say about it. All right. This here is the first of the classic Bond movies I've seen. And this is why I am a little butthurt that Peter Sellers' Bond is on the thumbnail, but not George Lazenby.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. Yeah, so On Her Majesty's Secret Service, it's a bit of a divisive movie for one big reason, which is the elephant in the room. We do not have Sean Connery playing Bond.
So was Connery gone now?
Not for good, but that's going to be the next movie. So, yeah. What happened was Sean Connery was already getting tired of the series after You Only Live Twice. Like he just wanted out. So what they did was they got a younger actor to replace Connery, and that would be Australian man George Lazenby. He was not an actor before On Her Majesty's Secret Service. My understanding is that at the time they got him, he was an underwear model. That said, he did have experience that intrigued them. Fun fact for you, there are only 2 Bond actors, well, actually 2 actors across the entire franchise, to my knowledge, who had actual real-world experience with espionage.
Oh.
The first one was George Lazenby, because he was in the Australian military. He learned martial arts. He freaking did martial arts with Bruce Lee. And if you're curious, the other person who has real-world espionage knowledge would be Christopher Lee. So he was, I think, with the British Secret Service during World War II. But yeah. So George Lazenby was cast as Bond, and they were offering him everything, a 7-picture deal and all that good stuff. However, number one, Lazenby got a little bit full of himself because he didn't really understand like the ups and downs of being an actor in the big boy film industry. Like, it got to a point where the producers and like his fellow cast members didn't like him that much. And the second thing, when the movie came out in theaters, lots of people didn't like Lazenby simply because he wasn't Sean Connery. And the final nail in the coffin was Lazenby had a particularly bad agent. His agent advised him that he shouldn't have continued to play Bond.
Yeah, did he regret that?
Yeah, his agent felt he shouldn't continue to play Bond because spy movies were going out of style. Like, basically, if Lazenby wanted to have a successful career, this agent was telling him he couldn't continue with Bond. So combine all of that, and George Lazenby chose to walk away after only 1 movie. And yeah, to this day, people continue to shit on George Lazenby. Like, anytime the 6 Bond actors are brought up, usually Lazenby is never part of the discussion. I remember one YouTube video put it like this. Here's my pick for the best Bond movies from each of the Bond actors. Except for George Lazenby, because let's be honest, no one gives a shit about him. And I guess you could say of all the Bond actors, frickin' Lazenby went on to have probably the weakest post-Bond career. Literally the only thing I know him being in after this was that he voiced one of the villains in Batman Beyond. And all of that described, I honestly do not understand why people are that vicious to Lazenby. Because, yeah, he doesn't... In this first movie, you can argue that he doesn't have the same oomph that Sean Connery brought to the table. Like, the thing with Connery is that he had, like, that very suave charisma that, like, people kind of stereotype Bond as being like. I need a tissue, but I don't have...
Well, they do that to... I don't see they do that today too with actors and actresses they don't like that replace their...
Yeah, and it's like freaking... Yeah, Sean Lazenby you can tell was like a little bit inexperienced, but at the same time, he could have molded into a more professional like performance with time and the role. It's not like, even if he's like a little bit less professional, he still does everything you'd expect of a Bond actor to do. He does the stunt work, the sparks of charisma, and yeah. It's funny because of all the classic Bond movies that came before Pierce Brosnan, this is probably my favorite of the classic Bond movies. Because it has a really solid story. It has this personal, down-to-earth feeling because unlike all the other Bond girls in the previous Connery movies, the Bond girl in this movie is this woman called Tracy. And he actually forms a genuine relationship with her over the course of the movie. And that leads to the famous ending. But I can get to that in a minute.
Right.
So, also, Blofeld returns in this movie, but he's not played by Donald Pleasance. Now he's played by a guy called Telly Savalas. And you have to give me a minute. Somebody's coming downstairs. I'm sorry.
Right. So we're waiting for him to return. You guys in the audience have a favorite James Bond movie? Or James Bond storyline? Or villain? Hey, if you want, support the channel.
Okay, I'm good.
Well.
So, as I was saying, the Blofeld actor in this movie is a guy called Telly Savalas. And he not only gets a lot more screen time than Donald Pleasance did in the last movie, but he has a much more sinister goal. His voice is more imposing. His appearance is more realistic. Like, it's the same as, like, the last movie, but he doesn't have the scar. Like, he looks a lot closer to, like, what Dr. Evil looked like in Austin Powers. And they have really solid action set pieces using the Swiss Alps. Like, they have, like, the big set piece at the end is, like, a chase scene involved where Bond is going after Blofeld on a bobsled. Then, probably, like, the one thing that was kind of silly about this movie is there's this long, extended set piece where Bond poses as some scientist, and for some stupid reason, even though it's Lazenby in the scientist disguise, the guy he's posing as dubbed over Lazenby's dialogue, and I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why people thought Lazenby's performance was bad. But yeah, so then we get to the famous ending that causes that, like, I think firmly puts this movie, like, in top tier material. So as mentioned, throughout the course of the movie, Bond forms a genuine relationship with this woman, Tracy. The movie straight up ends with them getting married. Like, the supporting staff of the MI6 crew are in attendance. Like, everything's all happy. They're they're going on a drive after leaving the wedding. Like, they're talking about their plans for each other. They make a pit stop on the road, but then turns out Blofeld and one of his henchmen are still alive, and they do a hit and run on their car with a machine gun. Bond ducks out of the way, he's okay, and, like, he's pretty annoyed that Blofeld's back. He gets back in his car, he looks over, they had shot his wife. She's dead. And that's how the movie ends.
So like a sad ending or a cliffhanger or what?
It's more or less, it's both. It's a sad ending and a cliffhanger because that was actually a scene directly adapted from the book. It's my understanding that of all the movies that were directly adapted from books, On Her Majesty's Secret Service was actually pretty faithful. And yeah, and that continued into the next book where Bond actually did go to get revenge for his wife's death.
That does also continue in the next movie?
Kind of. But not really. And that's where, you know what, we're going to go to the next movie. Like, I will say, the ending alone is where lots of sympathizers for George Lazenby freaking give him lots of credit. They single it out because he sells it. But yeah, we are going to the next movie. Oh boy, look at how low that number is.
26.
Out of 27. Yeah, for me, this is the worst movie of the official continuity. And the second worst movie, only behind the dog shit that is Casino Royale 67. I'm going to read the first paragraph of my Letterboxd review word for word because it perfectly sums up everything wrong that I have wrong with this movie. So, as you can see in the poster, Sean Connery came back. They got Sean Connery back for this movie after they lost George Lazenby, right?
Yep.
So this is my paragraph that I use to describe this movie, word for word. Well, Sean Connery came back. He put in the bare minimum effort. The heartbreakingly tragic ending of On Her Majesty's Secret Service is almost completely ignored. The effects and post-production budget took a big hit from the huge paycheck the producers needed to fork over out of desperation of keeping Connery. And they pivoted towards an unfunny, silly tone in what's easily the most dull and unexciting Bond story of the official continuity so far. But Sean Connery came back. You happy?
The cat came back the very next day.
And the reason I phrased that paragraph like that was because Diamonds Are Forever got pretty positive reviews at the time of its release. And from what I could see, all of those positive reviews pretty much had nothing to say but, yay, Sean Connery's back!
Did he want to come back, or
No, he didn't!
Did they at least pay him for his efforts?
They had to! They had to in order to get him back! Like, they paid him, like, it was like $2 million. Common nowadays, but back then, that was eyebrow raising.
Well, so I knew what would that be in today's money?
Probably, yeah, even if you factor in inflation, it's still not, it probably wouldn't be eyebrow raising today, especially when you look at Robert Downey Jr.'s salary for Avengers Doomsday. But yeah, so they had to fork over that huge paycheck to Sean Connery because when they lost George Lazenby, they could not find anybody else. Like, they were desperate. Like, I think they may have approached Roger Moore at this point, but I think he was unavailable or uninterested. They were so desperate that either by this point or the next movie, they were straight up approaching American actors to play Bond. Like, I know they approached Clint Eastwood and they approached Adam West.
So I'll probably get to it eventually later, but when did the people finally accept non-Connery as Bond people?
Probably into Roger Moore.
Uh,
Or hell, maybe it was Diamonds Are Forever that convinced people, yeah, it's a good thing for Sean Connery to leave. At least that's what I want to think. But yeah, so they straight up approached Adam West and Clint Eastwood to play Bond at one point, and while they were both very humbled, and quite frankly, Adam West could have used the work after 60s Batman was done, but they both humbly turned it down because they knew that it wouldn't be right for an American actor to play Bond. So yeah, they were so desperate that they forked over a lot of money for Sean Connery to come back. And that was the majority of the movie's budget. You can tell because the opening scene is Bond going on a bit of a rampage looking for Blofeld, and Tracy's never directly alluded to. So for all we know, this could just be a continuation of You Only Live Twice. And legit, the ADR during this scene is so bad. It's freaking, you can tell Sean Connery was disinterested in returning. When he goes around, on a rampage interrogating people looking for Blofeld, his dialogue is legit. It sounds like this. Where is he? Where is Blofeld?
So you can tell he's not putting in any effort at all.
Yeah. And you can very tell it's obviously ADR'd, he looks bored for most of his screen time. And that suave charisma that attracted people to him in the role, he doesn't have it here. He does some okay action scenes, but they are few and far in between. Then the story. So, the story opens with, Bond getting rid of Blofeld, presumably. Then the next hour of the movie is about some stupid diamond trade of some kind, but then it turns out, oh, nope, he didn't kill Blofeld. Blofeld's back with another world-ending scheme. And this time, Blofeld's played by yet another actor. This guy's name was Charles Gray. Now, first of all, Charles Gray in the role, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's the weakest of the three Blofelds. Number one, it's distracting to see Charles Gray in the role because I didn't mention this before. He played a supporting character in You Only Live Twice. And he's back playing Blofeld. Completely different role. And also, he doesn't have any of the threat or menace that Donald Pleasance or Telly Savalas brought. Frankly, they spent too much of this movie trying to make Blofeld funny, including a scene where Blofeld dresses up in drag. I'm not making that up, by the way.
That's a joke for you.
Really? Okay. So, freaking... And there's just stupid, silly stuff in this movie. There's a random scene of an elephant playing a slot machine, and it wins, and it's happy about it. And then there's like these two doofuses that are like chasing Bond throughout the movie in the background. And they finally have like a little set piece at the end after Blofeld's beaten. Yeah, like Diamonds Are Forever. Like, it was just a movie cobbled together out of desperation after losing George Lazenby. And like, yeah, it's the one Bond movie that I could do without of the
Besides
official
the
continuity. Besides Casino Royale 67. The one good thing about it is that Sean Connery did donate his paycheck to like a Scottish charity, I think.
so that high pay raise was worth it then in the end.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, obviously Connery doesn't be here, so we got to officially get a new actor now.
Yep, and that's where we go to Live and Let Die.
The halfway point.
Well, on my rankings anyway. I'm wearing out my voice. So, we start the tenure of a new Bond actor, and this guy actually stayed this time. So, to describe Roger Moore's Bond, so Sean Connery was very suave. George Lazenby was a lot more humanized. I would say Roger Moore is probably the most gentleman-like of the Bond actors that we've gotten. He's very polite and respectful to like people he interacts with. Like, he's very matter of fact when like interacting with things around him, and like he never has like a bad thing to say about people that don't deserve it. And it's fitting because Roger Moore was very much like that IRL. Like, he was a firm believer in the phrase, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. And he had to say that about quite a few things he worked on in his career. So, but outside that gentleman attitude, he still has wit and cunning to his attitude. He still has wit and cunning when he needs it. And also, one thing that would be a bit of a hallmark of the Roger Moore era is that his movies were considerably sillier than what Sean Connery's movies were like. But it works because everything's in tone, and like Roger Moore's interactions with the silly stuff like sort of complements it.
Okay. Now, the people accept Roger Moore the first time around. They slowly get to.
I'm not sure about the start, but people did accept him over time. So, another thing that helps this movie hold up is that it has a memorable set of villains. You have Dr. Kananga, Teehee, Baron Samedi. Yeah, like everybody chews the scenery in this movie, and like it gets a little too silly at points, but like thematically it fits. Like, probably my big criticism of this movie is that some of the fight scenes look like a dramatic stage show. Like, it kind of looks fake and a little too choreographed.
Oh, I forgot to ask about what year are these movies?
This was 1973.
Still before me even.
Yeah, you would be. I don't even think you were around for Moonraker, which was 79. But let's see. Next movie, if I can find it. Okay. The next movie is The Man with the Golden Gun. Like, this movie was a pretty big step down from Live and Let Die. Like, I don't really like how it's totally inconsistent. Like, sometimes it has the overly silly tone that Live and Let Die established, And then other times it goes into a pretty dark and serious tone, largely with how the villain Scaramanga treats women, and there's even a pretty out of character moment for Morse Bond when he interrogates a woman rather brutally. And there's also parts of this movie where they kind of waste time. Like, there's this whole subplot where he has to go to a martial arts school, Bond does, and I don't get why. And yeah, like, I did not feel very strongly about the man with the golden gun, but one of the big saving graces, well, when they stick to the silly tone, for the most part, it's okay. Even though the silly stuff with the henchman of this movie, Knick Knack, yeah, I could have done without. But probably the strongest point of this movie is the villain, Scaramanga. He is played by Christopher Lee. And the thing with his Scaramanga's thing is that he's a deadly assassin. And he's essentially always looking for like the next big challenge. And that's why he wants to duel Bond. And like the climax where he and Bond have their climactic duel, like it is easily the best scene in the movie. So yeah, that's the Man with the Golden Gun. Like, it's a watchable movie, but like it's not one I'd be rushing to rewatch. I mean, well then again, Christopher Lee is like the big reason to watch it. Alright. Next, we have The Spy Who Loved Me. I would say this is probably the best of Roger Moore's movies.
And apparently one of the best in your list too.
Yeah. So, while they did explore some Cold War themes in the Sean Connery era, like largely related to Spectre, this one did Cold War themes that were actually very, very realistic and relevant. Like, movies like this made people question if James Bond could exist in a world without the Cold War. And the answer to that was yes, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So, this movie actually does really, really good connecting itself to the Cold War. So, like, the plot of it is that these submarines that are carrying nukes go missing, and essentially the UK and the Soviet Union have to sort of join together to kind of find them, because obviously they don't want that kind of crap getting caught in the wrong hands. And the thing is, while the Soviets and the British are, and the Americans are involved too, while the West and the Soviets are outwardly respectful to each other, very obviously, behind the scenes, they're plotting how are we going to get the advantage here.
So what year is this?
77.
So yeah, Cold War still had like at least 10 years left in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the titular Spy Who Loved Me is a Soviet agent by the name of Anya Amasova, I believe Anya's her first name. And she's the Bond girl this movie, and her relationship with Bond is actually very complex because they have to work together, but they're still on opposite sides of the Cold War conflict. And like, so there's lots of tensions related to their country's different goals. They do start to form a bit of a bond, but then the tension against each other does actually become a bit more personal, because later on Amasova finds out that Bond had previously had to kill her lover on the job.
In a different movie or in this
movie?
Kind of...
Well, it happened off screen.
Okay, off screen.
So yeah, like just the way their relationship is depicted has a lot of intrigue to it. And, of course, this is the movie that gave us Jaws. Jaws is the big guy henchman with, like, the metal teeth.
Oh.
Like, he's very physically imposing. He's downright scary at times in how he can walk off so many things that would otherwise kill a man. Like, he gets...
I thought you were going to say that this movie brought us somehow connected to the shark Jaws.
Well, speaking of which, he actually kills a shark with his metal teeth in this movie. But yeah, like freaking, he gets attacked by a shark, he gets thrown off a train, he gets buried under rubble, he gets hit by a car, he just walks all of that off, no injury, all he really does is dust off his suit. And yeah, like, he's one of the most memorable henchmen for a reason. And yeah, like, probably my one criticism of this movie is that the actual villain, a guy called Karl Stromberg, his plan is effective for the Cold War themes, but otherwise, he was kind of forgettable.
His assistant overshadowed him.
His assistant overshadowed him. And yeah, that's all I've got for Spy Who Loved Me. Next up, we've got Moonraker. So, it's funny. Up to this point, all the Bond movies would generally announce the title of their next movie in the credits, and they would say, like, so, like, say in the credits of Live and Let Die, they would have James Bond will return in The Man with the Golden Gun, or they would have James Bond will, at the end of Man with the Golden Gun, James Bond will return in The Spy Who Loved Me. Well, Spy Who Loved Me ended with James Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only. But that's not the name of the movie we got here, right? So, there's a very, very big reason why Moonraker got made instead. And that reason starts with this.
Star Wars overshadowed it.
Yeah, when Star Wars was a massive success, literally everyone and their mother was rushing to make space-themed movies.
Oh.
And James Bond hopped on that train.
Oh, God.
Yeah, Moonraker is not a very popular movie because of how stupid the premise of James Bond going into space and, like, firing lasers and everything is.
I think the only one ever worked like that at the time was Spaceballs.
Well, Spaceballs was not for like another decade at this point.
Oh, this was immediately after.
Yeah. And yeah, but that said, you can see that my rating for Moonraker's not that low. And that's because, yeah, it's a silly movie, but it's also pretty lovably silly. Like, it kind of knows what it is and kind of runs with it. And I think it does have a lot to do with how the silly tone was just sort of Roger Moore's thing during his tenure as Bond. Like, he works off the silly stuff really well. Like, it just kind of fits with him.
It's like one of those things where I'm going to blow up the moon.
Well, that's not the plot of this movie's villain, Hugo Drax. Essentially, he wanted to create a super he wanted to create a super advanced society that lived in space. And then I guess everybody on Earth be damned.
Like he's gonna
So
destroy the like he's gonna destroy the Earth, so everyone had to buy land up on his space or the moon, whatever, or something. Like, hey,
maybe something like that.
I'm gonna blow up the Earth or destroy it or pollute it. So buy a ticket to my space colony, only $1 million per ticket.
Yeah, and also Jaws from the last movie makes a return. So he doesn't have nearly as much of his menace, but he kind of makes up for it for how he unashamedly adds to the movie's comedy. And thankfully it fits because he did have a lot of comedic moments in Spy Who Loved Me. And this is complete with giving Jaws a romance subplot. And I kind of laughed out loud when Jaws sees his love interest for the first time. They legit have them lock eyes with each other, complete with that stereotypical love music you'd always hear on Nickelodeon shows in the 90s. Like, it's the one that goes... like that music. And yeah, freaking, this movie is silly, but like I do have to appreciate how it commits to it and is not super egregious about it. Because there is another movie that would be very, very silly, but it wasn't lovably silly, it was just stupid, but we'll get to it later. All right, now we go to the intended next movie, For Your Eyes Only. And little production note for you. This was the final Bond movie that was distributed only by United Artists because United Artists got into a lot of money problems, and that's when they got acquired by MGM.
I was say, did they sell the rights to Bond or something, or this?
No, MGM just simply acquired them. So
was MGM owned by Disney at this point?
Who was owned by Disney?
Was MGM owned by Disney at this point?
No, I don't think Disney owned them.
I was wondering because
they had the Disney MGM studios, but I think that was because MGM gave them the rights to the name.
Oh, okay. I don't know, like they bought it later or something because of that name, the studio name or something. But okay.
But yeah, so For Your Eyes Only, I did really enjoy this one because it gave me a lot of Spy Who Loved Me vibes. Like all the Cold War connections. They have a Bond girl who participates in the action and has a personal stake in the plot. I did like a lot of the action set pieces, including a really tense sequence where Bond has to rock climb on a wall, and he very narrowly comes close to falling. Like, I did like sort of like the conspiracy espionage story that went on here. And also, the opening scene was the one time they got around the Kevin McClory bullshit, and they managed to feature Blofeld in all but name. Like, he's very distinctly recognizable, except now he's in a wheelchair. And like it's an opening set piece where Roger Moore's Bond is visiting Tracy's grave. Essentially, the point of this opening sequence was to finally revisit On Her Majesty's Secret Service and Service's ending and, well, give it proper closure. Kind of. So yeah, this was a pretty solid movie of Moore's tenure. And then we go down to bullcrap again. If you don't mind, could I grab a drink, please? Because I think I'm losing my voice.
No problem.
Thanks.
So, Alma, Eddie, anybody else watching still? You have a favorite You have a favorite Bond movie? Hey guys, support the channel. Plug, plug, plug. Neither have I. Can you beat it? I need commercials for days like this. Link Tree for 1998. Check it out. Twitch for 1998. Check it out.
All right, I am ready. So now the year is 1983.
I am alive now.
Well, you're also around for Your Eyes Only. I'm just looking for something because there is a video clip from the movie I might have to play. It's only a few seconds long and it's screen recorded. It's not screen recorded, it's camera recorded. Only because Octopussy is one of the worst Bond movies, in my opinion.
Sounds like a porno.
Yeah, it's not a porno. So the problem with Octopussy is that there's no actual plot for like 2/3 of its runtime. It's something about Bond going around in India investigating some Fabergé egg or something. And it's just him walking around talking mostly. Like, it is so damn forgettable. The movie's villain, I keep forgetting his name. I think his name is, where is it in this writing? Kamal Khan is the name of this movie. He's villain, and I can't tell you a damn thing about him. And also, another problem with this movie is that, for lack of a better word, Roger Moore just seemed tired. And it makes sense, unfortunately, because it should be noted, Roger Moore started playing Bond like when he was in his early to mid 40s. By now, he's entering his mid 50s. So, needless to say, he's getting... I mean, when you factor in people like Tom Cruise, you can argue it's maybe not appropriate to say he was getting a little too old to be playing Bond, but in Roger Moore's case, you can tell he did not have the same physicality he used to.
Was he getting tired of the movie to this point?
My understanding is that he was sort of recognizing his age and he wanted to walk away after this movie, but they convinced him to come back for one more, and stuff happened during that movie where he realized, no, I need to walk away now. But we'll get to that. So...
Listen, what was Moore getting... Was he starting to get typecast or something?
No, it's more... I think it was more that the producers were really afraid about having to repeat the process of finding somebody else after how it went with Lazenby and Connery. But I will say Roger Moore did have a pretty weak post-Bond career, sadly. Like, the only things I know him for post-Bond, he was in the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie called The Quest. And the man said it himself, Roger Moore, when you have nothing, it's my opinion that when you have nothing nice to say, you don't say it at all. So I will say nothing about working on The Quest. Then there's only 2 other movies I know he appeared in. One of them was one of those dime a dozen cookie cutter Hallmark Christmas movies. Like, I think it was called like A Princess for Christmas or something, where he like plays like an old British king. And then the other one was when he did a voice in a Cats and Dogs sequel. Yeah. And yeah. Then, like, Octopussy has like a few scenes that sort of redeem it. Like, there's a pretty tense scene where Bond has to defuse a bomb, even if it's made a little too silly by the fact that he had to do infiltration in a literal clown costume. And yeah, like the movie's silly tone here gets to be a little too much. And this is the one scene, like the one friggin' scene that stuck with me, if I can freaking find it. There's one friggin' scene that stuck with me. I don't even know where I have this saved. When did I log Octopussy? I am very sorry this is taking too long. Great, letterbox crashed when I'm trying to read. I'm trying to find when I logged it. April 6th. Oh! It was in plain sight the whole time. Alright, so I'm going to screen share this.
Alright.
So, should I say what happens in the scene before or after?
Oh, you gonna screen share it? And I don't see it. There.
Yeah, I'm going to select the window. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it, but...
Sorry, 1 second. Okay, go.
All right, you want me to play the clip?
Yeah.
Okay. So... Did you hear that?
Yes.
I did not edit that.
James Bond went Tarzan.
Literally. That is probably the single dumbest thing, one of the single dumbest things I've seen from this entire franchise.
Okay, first James Bond went Star Wars. Now he's Tarzan.
Yeah.
Is this called jumping? Was this like the jumping the shark point of James Bond now or something?
More or less. It didn't help that people were getting concerned about Roger Moore's age. But before we go to Roger Moore's last movie, we have the other unofficial movie. Look who that is.
Yeah, put the screen back on again.
Oh, sorry. Look who that is.
Yep.
So, a little backstory. Remember Kevin McClory and Thunderball and everything?
Yep.
Well, he was very butthurt about Eon Productions' success with the Bond movies, and he was keeping the rights to Thunderball, Spectre, and Blofeld out of their reach out of petty spite. Well, he decided he wanted to make his very own series of James Bond movies. And to try and cap off this new series of Bond movies when he finally decided to get it made, he roped Sean Connery into coming into this movie. And this was 12 years after Diamonds Are Forever, so I guess Sean Connery, I think he had a bit of a career slump after Bond, but this movie, like, I guess you could say I don't know how they convinced him to come back to this movie, but obviously he had a little bit of a change of heart. Fun fact, the title of this movie, Never Say Never Again, well, after Diamonds Are Forever, Sean Connery, word for word, said he would never again play Bond. And this title, Never Say Never Again, was Sean Connery's own wife. It was her own idea for a title when they obviously couldn't call it Thunderball again.
Question: what year is this?
This was 1983, and notice it came out the same year as Octopussy.
Okay, let's see. Do you know what when Highlander came out?
I'm not sure.
I was wondering if this was. I know he was like in that movie as the teacher, and
I know in the late 80s, that's when Sean Connery's post-Bond career really took off. I guess he had Highlander, he had The Untouchables, he had Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But yeah, so this released the same year as Octopussy, and yeah, the press had a field day with it, from my understanding. I think they dubbed it Battle of the Bonds. Sean Connery versus Roger Moore. And my understanding is that Sean Connery and Roger Moore were very chipper about the whole thing. They apparently even ate lunch together during filming breaks. And yeah, ultimately, while Octopussy made more money, it's my opinion that while it's not a great movie, yeah, Never Say Never Again is the better movie of the two. So basically, Never Say Never Again is a slightly more modernized remake of the time of Thunderball. It does a lot of the same beats as Thunderball. Thunderball was already a movie I was not crazy about, and that holds true here. But, I mean, it's executed fine enough. And another thing that I have to give credit to this movie is part of the reason people were starting to have a problem with Roger Moore's age is because his Bond movies, the official continuity, were still trying to pretend that he was as young as he had ever been. Never Say Never Again was a bit smarter on that front by openly making its version of Bond older to accommodate Sean Connery's age.
So this would have been like an old spy coming out of retirement or something.
Basically, that's what they do with Connery's Bond here. And it's basically the same thing as Casino Royale 67, except here it actually makes sense. But yeah.
But still low on your list.
It's still low on my list because I already was not crazy about the original Thunderball. But that said, this is a competently made movie, and it's worth checking out just for curiosity reasons, but you don't really have to go out of your way to see it either. Now, as for Kevin McClory, simply put, Eon Productions were not happy that Never Say Never Again got to move forward in production. And my understanding is that there may or may not have been legal battles to prevent Kevin McClory from making any more of his Bond movies. Like, I know in the late 90s, he was considering remaking Thunderball again, this time with the next Bond actor, Timothy Dalton, but that got blocked, I think. And Kevin McClory would not pass away until, like, the late 2000s, early 2010. Like, I think sometime in the mid-2000s, like, at the earliest. And he, to the bitter end, kept up his petty feud with Eon Productions. And it wouldn't be until the early 2010s when his estate, with his kids not really caring so much about the Thunderball rights, finally gave it up to Eon Productions. But that's going to be a story much later on. All right, now we go to the last movie in Roger Moore's tenure. It is A View to a Kill. So, A View to a Kill, for a while, it held the distinction for a lot of people as being the worst of the official Bond movies. And here's the thing, people's arguments for that front were about as shallow for all the people who praised Diamonds Are Forever. People praised Diamonds Are Forever more or less because Sean Connery's back and no other reason. People shat on A View to a Kill for no other reason other than Roger's too old. So here's the thing. Yeah, go on.
Would they still try to portray him as young at this point?
Yes, they were still trying to portray him as young here.
So they didn't like do what the last movie did, where they made him an older spy.
Well, that's what Never Say Never Again did. Octopussy, in the official continuity, was pretending Bond was as young as ever, and that's what this movie does too. And here's the thing, by this point, Roger Moore really could not keep up with the stunt work. Like, apparently, it's to the point where it's only close-ups on his face that truly have Roger Moore on screen in this movie. A lot of the big, more complicated stuff had stunt doubles. Or, in the case of one scene, a literal dummy.
Where did he do all his stunts beforehand or something?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, okay.
And yeah. And the thing is, to his credit, he gave the role more energy here than he did during Octopussy, which I do have to give credit. But yeah, like, what action he does do on screen is not really physically demanding. And the thing is, he romances two different women in this movie, and it can come across as a little bit uncomfortable, but again, to Roger Moore's credit, he knew this. He was only here because the producers were desperate. The producers were desperate to keep him. And then came the moment when Roger Moore realized, yeah, I need to walk away after this, whether they like it or not. So the main
Bond... looking, because I'm gone.
Yeah, so the thing with the main Bond girl in this movie is called Stacy. Stacy's actor is named Tanya Roberts. Okay. One day when on the set, Roger Moore realized he was older than Tanya Roberts' mom. that was the moment where he's like to Albert Broccoli and the producers at Eon, I need to walk away after this, whether you like it or not. But yeah, so Roger Moore's age is a problem, but it's not really a deal breaker, in my opinion. Like, the plot also has a problem of kind of meandering around into like the last hour of the movie.
It's like I said, I
I
could have
had
done it.
worse examples, but yeah.
I was like say they could have done it if they, they didn't pretend he was a 20-year-old still.
Yeah, but that's what they were doing. So I would say the big thing that saves this movie is the villain, Max Zorin, who's gloriously played by Christopher Walken.
Before it, Christopher who?
Christopher Walken.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like he is a great combo being a cartoon villain and a freaking psycho madman. Like every moment where he's on screen is a blast to watch. And like the henchman you can see on screen here, Mayday, she's played by Grace Jones. Like she's a very memorable henchman too. And they have some good action set pieces. Like there's a fire in a building, there's a car chase through San Francisco. There's this whole sequence in the mines where like Zorin just goes insane. Freaking he destroys the mines, he kills his workforce pretty much just because he can. And then there's a climactic fight on the Golden Gate Bridge. And the soundtrack in this movie is pretty awesome too. So, like, this movie has a lot of redeeming qualities. It is far from being the worst of the Bond movies. But that said, would it have been better had Roger Moore walked away like he planned? Well, I don't know, but yeah. After this, we knew it was time for Roger Moore to go.
And who replaced them?
All right. Next up, we have The Living Daylights with our new Bond actor, Timothy Dalton.
Was he accepted?
I think so.
So unlike with Connery, this turnover was better.
Like, I think by this point, people had gotten used to the idea that there was going to be a new Bond actor like every 10 years or so. So, yeah, Timothy Dalton taking over the role was such a needed breath of fresh air. So, the thing that Timothy Dalton is considered one of the most overlooked Bond actors because essentially he's a prototype of what Daniel Craig would end up becoming. His movies are pretty grounded and realistic. And it's like, yeah, he does get some of the typical gadgets. Like there's still a sense of humor, but for the most part, they ground it close to reality with like the Cold War politics, like some of the darker themes, like Bond's more matter of fact attitude of things. Like it makes it a lot closer to home and relatable. And so the Cold War theme, this is the last movie that in the series that tackled Cold War themes while the Cold War was still going on. So my understanding is that this was at a time where the Soviet Union was deep in their glasnost policies, like where Gorbachev was like trying to open the Soviet Union up to Western ideas a little bit more. And what this leads to was lots of paranoia regarding defectors. And also, they were in the middle of their invasion of Afghanistan at the time. Which also plays into the plot of this movie. Like, this movie has a really engaging espionage plot, especially with its villains.
I see it was the cover they they did the famous circle thing.
While all the movies up to this point in the official continuity have been doing it. So yeah, like I just really enjoyed this movie's espionage plot and how they make Bond himself like a lot more realistic and relatable in this movie. So, I mean, there's not really much I can add to it because, yeah, it doesn't really do anything super remarkable, but, like, after the Roger Moore movies had run their course, like, this was a very much needed breath of fresh air. So, yeah. And then we get to Timothy Dalton's second movie, and unfortunately, it was his last, but I'll get to why in a moment after this. Get rid of that thing. So, License to Kill is a bit of an oddball because I do concede that The Living Daylights has an overall more interesting plot, but License to Kill is overall more memorable because of the oddball things it does. So, the thing is, all the Bond movies up to this point were rated PG. Like, even after PG-13 was created, they were still keeping the PG rating.
Ah.
Well, License to Kill is where that streak ended. So I mentioned that The Living Daylights, in its more grounded, realistic tone, was quite a bit darker than like what the Roger Moore movies were like. They lean into that dark tone much more in this movie. Like, the villain of this movie, Franz Sanchez, who's played by Robert Davi, who you might know for playing one of the Fratellis in the Goonies. Specifically, he's the guy they break out of prison at the start. Like, he's the one that sings Italian opera and everything. That's Franz Sanchez in this movie. So yeah, Franz Sanchez is a Mexican drug lord. And yeah, they do not sugarcoat that Franz Sanchez, yeah, he has charisma, but he is downright frightening when he gets pissed. Like, there is a lot of brutality in this movie. Like, straight up, it's the one Bond movie that came closest to getting an R rating. But that said, they toned down some of the more gruesome scenes to get the PG-13. So, yeah, like, Franz Sanchez is a pretty awesome villain, and the thing with this movie is that it's a simpler revenge story. Like, Bond attends the wedding of a guy called Felix Leiter, who was a recurring character across the series up to this point, but this is one movie where, like, he's a lot more central to the plot. So, he attends Felix Leiter's wedding, and they're kind of celebrating because Leiter just took down Sanchez and got him arrested. And Sanchez tries to bribe him, but like he's not having it. So Sanchez instead manages to bribe someone who would take it. He gets out of his prison transport, and then he goes to Felix Leiter and his wife with a vengeance. His wife ends up dead, and Felix Leiter himself gets freaking mutilated by a shark, though he's still alive. And basically, this movie is Bond going on a revenge quest for his friend. So it's a lot simpler on that front, but still, like...
And this is also one of the more, I think, well-known titles.
I guess, yeah.
Well, at least I remember. Sounds familiar to me, at least. I don't.
Well, you would have been almost 10 at the time this came out.
No, so I meant not the movie itself, but the thing, Goldfinger, License to Kill. That sounds like
Yeah.
famous ones that in the memory.
Yeah, so while it is a simple revenge story, I just really like the execution here. The Bond girl in this movie is an American agent called Pam Bouvier, and her interactions with Bond are on a similar level to what Anya Amasova was like in Spy Who Loved Me. She's very headstrong and independent, but a little bit to a fault because there are some things she screws up. And she and Bond do get a genuine relationship over the movie. Like, they're hard asses to each other over their differences and their experience, but then they do come to respect each other. And then there's Q. Like, Q is the guy who has been giving Bond his gadgets at MI6 all this time. And I should note, the original actor, well, he's not the original actor for Q. Q's actor, Desmond Llewellyn, was the longest running actor up to this point. He had been playing the character since From Russia with Love, and he was still with the series at this point, when it was like over 20 years later, almost 30.
So he's gone to like 4 different.
This is his 4th Bond actor he's been on. And I bring up Q now because he has a more active role in the story this time, because he actually comes out in the field and helps Bond. And the reason why is because the whole reason it's called License to Kill is because MI6, doesn't want Bond going on this revenge mission, but he basically revokes his license to kill so that he can go on at it on his own, because it's that personal to him. But yeah, like, I liked the risks that the movie took, and like, it just paid off well. Sorry.
Right now, you mentioned that this was his last movie.
Yeah. So about that, right after License to Kill came out, like it my understanding is that it did okay at the box office, but it still didn't do that great. And then shortly after, MGM got a bit of an executive shakeup. Essentially, I think they got like a new CEO who tried to use MGM as like a money laundering scheme or something like that. And as a result, combine that with a lot of longtime Bond producers either dying or getting too sick to work on the series, which included Albert Broccoli himself. Production on another Bond movie kind of went on a standstill. And for much of the early 90s, Timothy Dalton was sort of left waiting, twiddling his thumbs, seeing if they were going to do anything. Then finally, like, I've heard various stories of what happened. It's like when they were finally ready to get moving on another movie, like, I guess the new heads at MGM just didn't want Timothy Dalton anymore. Or what had happened was enough time. Another story I've heard was that enough time had passed where Timothy Dalton was interested in doing one more movie, but exactly that, one more movie. And the producers wanted him for more. And ultimately, whatever the case, he ended up leaving the franchise in 1994. And it really sucks because I would have liked to have seen where he would have went with a third movie. But still, the movie that came after, that should be very recognizable to a lot of people. Take it all in.
GoldenEye.
So, my relationship with this movie goes like this. I get really, really, really friggin' irritated by all the people who act stunned and surprised that their favoriteest video game in the whole wide world was actually, matter of fact, based on a movie. And I take great offense to that because that implies that that this movie is not worthy of being in the video game spotlight, when in fact this movie is the best of the original continuity for me. Like, everything this movie does, it does, like, the whole point of it was proving that James Bond could still exist in a post-Cold War environment. Like, Pierce Brosnan is, like, easily, if I had to say a personality trait of Brosnan's Bond, it's that he's the most professional on the job. Like, in the opening moments of the movie, like, you could see him move with so much confidence. He treats everything matter of fact. He knows what the hell he's doing. Like, when you piss him off, he gets pissed. But he also knows when to be playful. And yeah, like, the whole thing with this movie was proving that James Bond was a franchise that could endure, like, because the 90s were, like, increasingly relying on these huge action blockbusters that were far more explosive and elaborate compared to, like, what the old Bond movies were like. Well, GoldenEye was proving it could be part of the crowd too and succeed at it. Like, the movie overall feels a lot higher budget than the previous Bond movies were like. There's more elaborate camera work. There's a lot more practical effects and whatnot. More elaborate set pieces. And it helps that the story itself is very engaging. Like, the set of characters and villains we get are very engaging to watch. Like, you have Sean Bean's character, Trevelyan. You have Xenia Onatopp. You have Boris, freaking the I Am Invincible dude. Then Natalia, the Bond girl in this movie. Like, she is one of the most memorable Bond girls that's not an agent herself. Like, she has very limited combat knowledge, but her computer skills come into play. Like, her plot's engaging. Like, Brosnan's Bond himself, like, the whole thing with Trevelyan's betrayal of MI6, it's a legitimately thrilling story that just puts all the right pieces together. And yet, it feels like people remember the game more. And to the point where people are kind of shun this movie in favor of the game. And that's something I don't really like to stand behind.
And it takes your bronze medal.
Yep, it's top 3. It's number 3. So then we have the next movie. So in general, freaking people who talk about Pierce Brosnan's era as Bond, they know, lots of them who even acknowledge GoldenEye is in fact a movie and didn't start out as a video game. Many people will say GoldenEye was the only good movie he made during his time as Bond, and many people bring that up as like a tragic kind of thing because many of them really like Brosnan's Bond, but then feel like the other movies didn't give him much to do. Well, at least in the case of his second and third movies, I feel like they're a bit misunderstood. So the thing with Tomorrow Never Dies is, Yeah, it's a bit unconventional of a Bond movie because essentially the villain of the movie is a guy called Elliot Carver who manufactures his own doom and gloom news stories for ratings. Essentially, this whole movie is social commentary on radical news networks like Fox News. And it is like people may have thought it was silly back then, but nowadays, especially, it's aged surprisingly gracefully. Like, I will say that the set pieces aren't nearly as memorable as GoldenEye, but, like, still, the plot's engaging. Like, again, Elliot Carver's a surprisingly relevant villain, even if aspects of him are kind of wimpy, like the way he gets killed off. And, yeah, like, I still think this is a pretty solid movie. So... However, I kind of joke maybe people don't like this movie as much because the video game it got sucked. I don't know if you remember me playing the game for YouTube, but I had to literally use an invincibility code to get through the end of it. Alright, so The World Is Not Enough is another movie that's pretty mediocre, considered pretty mediocre by a lot of people, but I do think it has a lot of merit on its own. For one thing, this was the last movie in the series to have Desmond Llewellyn's Q. And his send-off is actually pretty damn emotional.
Did they kill him?
No, but it's pretty obvious he's retiring. And they set up his replacement. He has an assistant in the movie that they nickname R, and R is played by John Cleese. So, anyways, the thing with this, what brings The World's Not Enough down is that its main villain, Renard, is pretty generic. Like, his gimmick is that he can't feel pain, but they don't really tie it thematically to anything. And then the Bond girl, this movie, Christmas Jones, the thing is, she's supposed to be this renowned nuclear scientist. She's played by Denise Richards. Denise Richards is the girl in the tank top over there. Is she at all? Does she look at all believable as a nuclear scientist to you?
Maybe.
I know you don't have much to go off on that one picture, but does she look like a nuclear scientist to you?
Like maybe if she was a college genius.
Even if the look may or may not sell it, her acting doesn't sell it. So, I would say the stronger element of this movie that helps it stay afloat and make it pretty solid is the story with its other villain, Elektra King. So, the thing with Elektra King is that she was captured by Renard and held for ransom at one point, and M from MI6 famously told her father not to pay the ransom. And ultimately what had happened was Elektra King's character was utterly broken by this. Like, I mean, this is all off screen, of course. It's told in backstory. And it turns out she ended up forming a Stockholm Syndrome relationship with Renard. And the reason why it kind of works for me is because they imply it's a lot more complex than that. Like, they kind of imply that her imprisonment made her kind of battle-hardened and kind of gave her, like, this daredevil personality that makes her kind of want to be more of a go-getter, like, and freaking, like, a lot more cynical. Like, there's like a lot of character study to go into that, and it helps that the actor who plays Electra King is a lot more engaging than Denise Richards' performance. But yeah, like I do think, and then Robbie Coltrane, the actor who plays Hagrid, he had a bit part in GoldenEye, but he has a more expanded role here, and I did like seeing more of his character interactions with Pierce Brosnan's Bond. But yeah, I think The World's Not Enough has some merits, but I do concede that it's a more of a step down for Brosnan's career. And then Brosnan pretty much goes to rock bottom. Die Another Day. Oh my God. This movie was basically the producers being desperate to try and stay hip and cool. There are so many ludicrous set pieces in this movie. Like, many of these set pieces are made with egregious CGI that just looks fake. Even the famous gun barrel had to put a freaking CGI bullet into it for no reason. The villain of this movie is a North Korean general who undergoes freaking gene therapy that somehow replaces his DNA and bone marrow and makes him into a white dude. And not only that, he is somehow able to take on the persona of a billionaire tech playboy who is very renowned for his work, all without somehow being able to be traced back to his original North Korean identity. And his big invention in this movie is a freaking satellite that is able to freaking redirect the sun's rays and basically create a huge death laser. And yeah, freaking they at first try to play up this movie as being like darker than usual because so Bond's on a mission in North Korea, like freaking he takes out the original identity of the freaking villain, and then he gets caught by the North Koreans and he's put through a year of torture. Like they play it up big time that Bond's gonna have like physical and emotional scars from it, especially because when he's rescued by MI6 in favor of one of the villain's henchmen, like they do a trade and everything, MI6 sort of leaves Bond on his own because they're worried he cracked under torture. And this is James Bond we're talking about here, and they think him, of all people, would crack under torture. And they play it up like Bond's going to be completely on his own, like he has to battle his trauma and everything. No, they forget about all that. He very easily gets himself into a luxurious hotel. He grooms himself. He gets all his equipment, and then it's business as usual. And yeah, another problem with this movie is that because it was the 40th anniversary, they do a distracting number of callbacks to like the earlier movies, like lots of set pieces or like shot for shot recreations of previous movies.
Like as tribute or just Easter eggs or just
it's meant to be a tribute, but it gets way too egregious. And yeah, freaking, you may notice this is not my at the very bottom of my list.
But
and the big reason why is because at least this movie's funny bad with all the stupid things it does. Like, Octopussy and Diamonds Are Forever are legit boring to sit through. This movie, for better or worse, if you watch it, in my opinion, you won't like it, but you won't be bored. So now there's two more things I needed to bring up. So John Cleese takes over as Q here. His time as Q was so criminally short. Like, he did get one more go in the game, Everything or Nothing, but yeah. Then Halle Berry's character, who you can see on the poster, they gave her a lot of attention in this movie alongside her handler, Michael Madsen, because get this, they wanted to do a spin-off with her. And take a wild guess if that went through.
No.
No.
Was this the first James Bond really wanted to give a spinoff to?
Yeah. That makes it even more weird. And yeah, this movie was made at a time where the James Bond series was now struggling with its identity. Speaking of which, the Bourne Identity came out around the same time. And it reinvented how spy movies were kind of seen because it was a lot more gritty and realistic. And yeah, Die Another Day was so bad that it killed the original series continuity. Which led us to a reboot.
From number one to from last place to first place.
Well, not exactly last place, but I get the idea. Yeah, Casino Royale, the actual version this time.
Well, I meant I wasn't your old Casino Royale original one not at your bottom of your list.
Yeah, the 67 one is at the very bottom, so this one's at the very top. Like, this movie, like, so as I hinted, the people were looking for spy movies to be more like the Bourne Identity. And this movie followed that format, and it utterly succeeded. Like, so the new Bond actor in the role is Daniel Craig. And I think they just took everything about how this is a rebooted continuity because now this version of Bond literally just joined MI6. Like, the reason I consider this number one is because Bond's story arc in this movie is very, very personal. Like, you get everything he goes through, like learning to be an agent, learning what kind of life is in store for him as an agent, and then when he falls for somebody, he debates whether he should leave it behind or keep working, and then he finds out that there was something deeper behind his relationship with her, with this woman Vesper. And it helps that this movie has really, really damn good action set pieces. And it has really good, like, everything about the realism angle just works well. Like, the way they have, like, the villain of this movie is Lashif, played by Mads Mikkelsen. He's not some world domination freaking supervillain. He's literally just a banker who funds terrorism. One of his jobs goes bad because of Bond, and now he has to make all that money back, or else his bosses are going to come for him. Like, everything, like, the down-to-earth feeling this movie makes it much more relatable than many of the previous Bond movies. And, well, that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of why it's my number one. So, like, I don't think I could really add much to what's already been said, but
they did. But your opinion, they did it much better than the original one.
Obviously. And now we're kind of back to bottom tier again.
Fall from grace.
So, Quantum of Solace, it's aggressively okay. Like, it has good action set pieces. It has good acting. It does have good themes, like how corporations and warlords can try to gain control of governments through vital resources. And on paper, they have a decent arc of Bond being rageful and bitter, because the thing with Casino Royale, the last movie, is that Vesper dies at the end in a similar fashion to Tracy, and obviously Bond's affected by it. The problem is that the writing in this movie is all over the place. Like, this story is just very, very weak. And unfortunately, it was kind of doomed to be so because it was made during one of the more infamous writing strikes in Hollywood history. Like,
Well,
everything about this movie is underwhelming. The villains are underwhelming. The conflicts are ultimately underwhelming.
was this a
Like,
2000? Was this a 2008 writer strike?
the 2008 writer strike. Yep. Like, and even Bond's arc of learning about Vesper, it amounts to him learning something he already knew. So it's like, this movie is just okay. The most aggressively okay. Like, it is, if you watch it, it'll be stimulating, but like, you're gonna forget about a lot of it. And it's just a shame because it came right after peak. But that's okay. We go right back to peak. So, Skyfall was the first Bond movie I ever saw in theaters. Well, the first movie in this series. It was the first Bond movie I saw in theaters. So what makes Skyfall work really well is that it keeps the grounded, realistic, and relatable tone of Casino Royale and even Quantum of Solace to an extent, and they start to bring in some of the more classic Bond elements. Like, the last two movies were missing Q and Miss Moneypenny. Frickin', this movie has a much more traditional Bond setup to it. And in a similar fashion to GoldenEye, there are a lot of themes as to whether or not MI6 and Bond himself are outdated. Like, especially because the world of espionage has changed so much in the last few decades. So they kind of run with that. Then the villain, Raul Silva, played by Javier Bardem, he is an absolute blast to watch. He is a freaking large ham who still has a relatably tragic story because his big thing is that he wants revenge on M for basically leaving him to die during a mission. And yeah, like, this movie was a much more effective tribute. Like, all the general easing into traditional Bond formula, that was how they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the franchise. Like, there's one thing I kind of nitpick. There's a final set piece where basically they're holding out at Bond's childhood home, trying to protect M, but also getting Silva out into the open so Bond can kill him. Well, there is a gamekeeper at Bond's old home called Kincaid. Kincaid was originally meant to be played by Sean Connery. Like, they very, very clearly wrote Kincaid with Sean Connery in mind. Ultimately, they didn't ask him to come back because they did worry that getting Connery on screen with Daniel Craig would have been distracting. And odds are good that Connery would have said no anyway because he was retired at this point. But wouldn't that have been awesome had they gotten Connery on screen with Craig? Daniel Craig, that is.
Yeah.
Especially because, fun fact, I don't think there's ever been a single movie, show, or anything where two Bond actors were on screen together.
Maybe he could have played James Bond's father or grandfather at this point.
Well, the idea was that he was gamekeeper of Bond's old childhood home. So, like, in a way, like, he was sort of like an Alfred figure to him.
Ah.
So, the guy they got to play the role, Albert Finney, I think his name was, he does fine, but, like, you can tell they wrote the character with Sean Connery in mind. But yeah, Skyfall is pretty friggin' awesome. We have two more movies, and good thing too, because my voice is starting to give out. So Spectre, this was after the Kevin McClory stuff was settled.
The rights are back again. They got the rights
yeah,
back.
So now they can use Spectre, and more importantly, they could use Blofeld. Well, maybe Spectre's more important, but so people had problems with this movie, mainly because some people don't like the pacing because the movie's like 2.5 hours long. Some people don't like some plot choices, namely a pretty silly one is that this continuity's version of Blofeld is now brothers with Bond. But still, I do kind of think Spectre is pretty underappreciated. Like, they do continue the themes of Skyfall about MI6 and the 00 program being outdated. The depiction of Spectre is really well handled, especially with how they try to seize control of world intelligence agencies through frickin' technology, now that they can do that. Like, I think what they were going to do in this movie was use an AI program. And Christoph Waltz is the new Blofeld. And while he doesn't get a whole lot of screen time, I feel like he did really well in the role. And also, they again doubled down on bringing the series closer to its more corny roots while still keeping the relative grit and realism that the Daniel Craig movies have been using. Like, yeah. If I had any criticisms, it would be that Bond actually falls for a woman in this movie named Madeline. And she's pretty generic in this movie. Like, they play her up as like a Tracy and Vesper-like figure, but I really did not get that vibe from her in this movie. But yeah, Spectre I do think is pretty underappreciated. And now, currently the last Bond movie that has been made as of the airing of this episode,
May 2025.
So, No Time to Die, it is a pretty emotional send-off for Daniel Craig's Bond. Like, he probably gives the best performance of his entire Bond tenure.
So, do you know if this is his official final Bond movie?
Oh, yeah, it is. Like, not only, I don't even have to say that he announced it himself. You've had enough years to see this movie. This movie has balls. This movie ends by killing Bond.
Yep, that would be it. Let's say retcon his death somehow. That would be the end of this guy's
Bond. Well, no. Inevitably, when they pick the next Bond actor, if they pick the next Bond actor at this point, because there's a lot of production, because there's another production shakeup at MGM again, because of Amazon acquiring them.
When did this come out again?
2021.
So this was during the pandemic thing.
It was supposed to release in 2020, but the pandemic got it delayed because they were not going to put this straight to streaming. They had to put it in
Okay.
theaters.
So post pandemic, but pre new writers strike.
Yeah. So yeah, like this movie does get a really emotional send off for Bond himself. Like it does bring his character arc really full circle. Like Madeline, who's now his wife, more or less, like she gets a better character arc. Freaking basically they do what they can to like tie up so many loose ends from this movie. That said, the plot is pretty messy. The MacGuffin of this movie is basically a super virus that only kills whoever is targeted by it. Like, it only kills specific targets. And anybody else who carries it just becomes a carrier.
Wow, that was I was like say that's some good I was thinking that I think it's either good or bad timing to happen right during the pandemic.
More or less, yeah. Though the comparison I'd say is a lot similar to Metal Gear Solid with how the virus works. And the reason why it's messy is because they spell out that MI6 was complicit in this virus's development, and they kind of hint that it's because of MI6 desperately trying to prove to the British government that they're relevant. But at the same time, it doesn't really go anywhere, and M never really gets punished for it. And also, the movie ends with Bond's death, yes. But here's the thing, freaking the movie kind of abruptly stops after that. Like, the MI6 crew have a toast to Bond, mourning him, and then the last shot of the movie is like a very brief driving scene of Madeline about to tell a story to her daughter about Bond, and then it just kind of stops. Like, it doesn't really give it time to sink in. You're just kind of like, that's it.
They did show his body on screen, right?
No. The last you see of him, he is on an island that's getting blown up, and you see his body getting engulfed by an explosion.
So it's one of those things you don't know. Off-screen death.
But it's pretty blatant since Daniel Craig is not coming back to the role. So, ultimately, I would say the big thing that really kind of holds this movie back is the villain. So the villain is a guy called Safin, who's played by Rami Malek. Malik's performance is not the problem. The problem is not only does Safin not really have any presence in this movie until the climax, his motivations are very, very underwritten. Like, the backstory is that he wanted revenge against Madeline, I forgot how to pronounce her name, her family, because her dad got his family, Safin's family, killed. But then he saves her life just because. Like, they barely explain what Safin even wants to do. Like, his big plan is to freaking use the super virus to freaking rewrite the world or something. And they barely even tell you why he wants to do that. Like, he is just the most generic supervillain. And it's like, for this emotional grand finale to the Daniel Craig series, that's the villain they go out on. And it's like, in my opinion, Blofeld should have been the villain again. Because Blofeld does appear in this movie. Christoph Waltz reprises his role. But he's only really in the movie in the background while Spectre agents do the work. And then the one big scene he gets with Bond, he kind of torments Bond for a little bit. Bond gets mad, and then freaking Blofeld catches the super virus and dies. In my opinion, they should have had Blofeld as like the villain who wanted to use this virus to rewrite the world or whatever, because that very much fits into Spectre's MO, and Blofeld would know damn well how to push Bond's buttons on the matter, not Safin. And yeah, so solid finale, but kind of messy. And that's all I've got. So what I'm going to do now is, if I can, all right, I'm going to zoom this back out and put these movies back in order, or at least try to. So I want to display them all on one page. Right. Sort by list order. And finally, there we are. These are my rankings for the movies.
Start from the bottom. And
so, absolute worst of the bunch, Casino Royale 67. It doesn't get a half star, because at the very least, some of its stupidity is ironically amusing, I guess. Diamonds Are Forever, boring, actor didn't want to come back. Then we have Octopussy at 25, Die Another Day at 24. And these are the truly bad movies. So Diamonds Are Forever and Octopussy, they're just friggin' boring to watch. Die Another Day is kind of funny bad. Quantum of Solace is at 23. It's severely okay. Man with the Golden Guns, 22. Never Say Never Again at 21. Thunderball at 20. A View to a Kill at 19. Moonraker at 18, for being silly, fun in a good way that knew it. World's Not Enough at 17. You Only Live Twice at 16. Dr. No. No Time to Die. Live and Let Die. Tomorrow Never Dies. From Russia with Love.
Now we're at top 10.
Yep, my top 10 is Spectre, Living Daylights, Goldfinger, License to Kill, For Your Eyes Only, Spy Who Loved Me, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, GoldenEye, Skyfall, Casino Royale.
Casino Royale.
The actual version.
The bookmark. Casino Royale bookmarks your series.
Yep, more or less.
So what do you overall? What do you take out of your James Bond binge?
What did I what?
Take out of it.
That the surprisingly more modern movies were more peak than the classic ones, I guess, but the classic ones have their place. And also, maybe that Sean Connery's tenure as Bond may have been a bit overrated, but that might just be me. Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton need more recognition. Well, parts of Roger Moore's career anyway.
So who is your favorite Bond actor?
That is very tough to say. Like, I may have to go with Pierce Brosnan just out of nostalgia bias, because he was the first Bond actor I was aware of. And also, Brosnan's Bond got a lot more adventures in video game form, like Agent Under Fire. Well, not Agent Under Fire, technically, because that wasn't Brosnan's Bond there. But, yeah, Nightfire, Everything or Nothing. But then Daniel Craig also got Bloodstone and the GoldenEye remake. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I want to say that I like all the Bond actors for different reasons, but, like, if I had to pick one that I would recognize the most, it would probably be Pierce Brosnan's.
Uh,
Yeah.
so you think coming up on your channel, you want to advertise?
Well, I've been doing live streams with two friends of mine, DL Jado and KOTOR Revan fan. Usually goes by Miles. KOTOR does. We wrapped up a stream series on the shitty game Skull and Bones, and our next plan after Jado completes his next game review is that we might do a brief stream series on Marvel Rivals. And also, I've been doing a separate series with just Miles on Black Ops 3. We're talking about how the campaigns in the single player campaigns in those games make absolutely no sense.
As for me,
yeah.
Well, as for me, hopefully we haven't trouble scheduling this. Next week we'll be doing our episode on the differences or similarities between the war of the Apatosaurus Brontosaurus controversy. You dinosaur lovers will know what I'm talking about. But I hope to see, as Snick says, Snick, you said you're gonna your next purge binge is the live remakes.
Yep, the Disney live action remakes. I can give a very small preview of that with these are the 5 movies I've seen so far. This is the only one I've given a positive rating, Jungle Book. And yeah, let's just say lots of not nice things are going to be coming out of my reviews for these live action remakes.
Can't wait to see that. Stay tuned for that review coming up.
Probably in a few months. We'll see.
All right. But until then, never stop learning and enjoy the randomness. We will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for watching my podcast or Let's Play. If you want to help support my channel, you can make a monthly or yearly pledge on Patreon, or just a one-time donation on Vimeo, PayPal, or Cash App. For those looking for something to wear, we have some shirts, hats, and other stylish things in our merch store. If you enjoy gaming, you can always follow and sub to me on Twitch. For those who don't want to give money, I have an Amazon and Steam wish list who can help the channel out. And of course, just liking, leaving a comment, and sharing this video helps more than you can imagine. And always remember to never stop learning and enjoy the randomness.